They laughed at my disabled friend, called her a freak, pushed her down the stairs and watched her cry. But I made sure the ringleader never stepped foot inside a college campus again. He thought it was over, until I made one call that changed everything. If you've ever wanted to see a bully get exactly what they deserve, hit that subscribe button right now. Like this video, and drop a comment if you've ever stood up for a friend when no one else would. You're not going to want to miss this story of cold, calculated justice. I never expected my senior year of high school to be the stage for a quiet war. But that's exactly what it became. Let me set the scene. My best friend, let's call her Casey, is one of the kindest, funniest, and most artistic people you'll ever meet. She also happens to walk with a noticeable limp and uses a cane due to a congenital condition affecting her leg. She's never wanted sympathy, just a fair shot at life like the rest of us. But in high school, fair is a foreign language. And for some reason, jerks like Tyler feel fluent in cruelty. Tyler wasn't just any bully. He was the worst kind, the golden boy type. Letterman jacket, straight A's, captain of 2 varsity teams. Teachers adored him. Parents trusted him. But behind closed doors, when no adults were watching, he was venom. He especially loved targeting Casey. He'd mimic her walk in the hallway with a limp and a cane made from a mop handle. He'd leave cruel notes in her locker. He once took her cane during gym and tossed it into the girls' locker room so she'd have to crawl to get it. But the day everything changed was far worse. Casey and I were walking out of biology class when he and his little entourage passed us in the stairwell. Tyler shoulder checked her hard, so hard she lost her balance. She tumbled down 4 steps and smashed her elbow on the landing. Her books scattered everywhere. And Tyler, he just laughed. I'll never forget the sound of it. That smug, careless laugh while Casey sat there trying not to cry from the pain and humiliation. And the teachers, they bought his innocent I didn't see her there act, hook, line, and sinker. No consequences. No justice. But that moment etched itself into my mind like a scar. I helped Casey up, and she whispered, "Please don't do anything. It'll just make it worse." But I couldn't let it go. This wasn't just high school drama anymore. This was systematic torment. It was someone vulnerable being destroyed for sport. And I wasn't going to let that stand. So I started observing. Quietly. Carefully. Like a hunter tracking his prey. I knew Tyler was applying to several top-tier universities. Ivy League schools. Prestigious liberal arts colleges. His goal? Political science. He talked constantly about his dream to run for office someday. Said he'd be a young, charismatic leader for change. If only they knew. What Tyler didn't realize was that I had access to the school's AV club and, more importantly, our yearbook photo archives. We had pictures, lots of them. Class candids. Hallway shots. Club events. Enough to show a consistent pattern of Casey being nearby, and him lurking close. But pictures weren't enough. I needed proof. So I started recording. Tyler was cocky, arrogant, and careless. Within a week, I had 3 separate audio clips of him mocking Casey's disability to his friends, one where he called her a broken toy, and another where he said she should be kept in a box so normal people don't have to see her. I sent the files to myself anonymously, saved the timestamps. Then I went for the jugular. Here's the thing, when you apply for financial aid, especially for competitive scholarships, character matters. So does your personal essay, your recommendations, and your disciplinary record. I knew Tyler's record was squeaky clean. I also knew that was a lie. I compiled everything, photos, audio clips, a timeline of incidents including the one where he pushed Casey down the stairs. I cross-referenced every incident with anonymous witness statements I gathered from people who'd seen but never spoken out. Then I crafted a letter. It was professional, concise, and brutal. I sent it, anonymously, of course, to the admissions and financial aid departments of every school Tyler had boasted about, along with the evidence package. But I didn't stop there. I also forwarded it to our school district's diversity and inclusion office. Then the local news tip line. Just a small nudge. Nothing huge. Just enough to start a fire. The fallout? Oh, it was glorious. About 3 weeks later, Tyler stormed into school, red-faced and furious. I heard from a friend in the front office that several of his top-choice schools had re-evaluated his application and withdrawn his merit-based scholarships. Some rejected him outright. One cited a pattern of behavior inconsistent with the university's code of conduct and values. Then came the internal review at school. With the weight of the recordings, the statements, and the now viral tip floating through town, the school board had no choice but to open an investigation. Tyler was suspended for bullying with intent to harm, a formal mark on his permanent record. He tried to spin it, of course. Claimed it was all jokes. Said Casey was just sensitive. But no one was buying it anymore. The golden boy had been unmasked. As for Casey, she got a written apology from the school. A private one from Tyler, though we both knew it was forced. More importantly, people started treating her with the respect she always deserved. Teachers looked at her differently. Other students offered to walk with her to class. And me. I didn't need praise. I didn't want thanks. But the look in Tyler's eyes every time he walked past me in the hall? That mix of confusion, fear, and rage? That was enough. I ran into Tyler a few years later, outside a community college campus. He looked tired, angry, like someone still clinging to the idea that the world had wronged him. He didn't recognize me at first. But when he did, the color drained from his face. He opened his mouth, maybe to curse me out, maybe to ask why, but I just smiled and said, "Good luck with your education." Then I walked away. Sometimes, justice doesn't need violence or shouting. Sometimes, all it takes is someone willing to be strategic, willing to stand up quietly but firmly when it matters most. Because the truth is, you can get away with a lot, until you mess with someone who has nothing left to lose, and a friend who's willing to make sure you never do it again. What did you think of this revenge? Have you ever seen someone finally get what they deserve? Let me know in the comments. I read every one. And if you enjoyed this, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share with someone who needs a little justice in their life today. See you in the next one. He tormented his team, changed deadlines for fun, and treated us like slaves. But what he didn't know, I'd been getting his debt collector calls for years. And the day I found out who he really was, I gave them his real number and his manager's. 2 months later, he vanished. Ever dreamed of turning the tables on a nightmare boss? You're going to love this. Smash that like button, subscribe for more true stories of delicious revenge, and comment below if you've ever worked under a tyrant who deserved to be taken down. This one's for you. Let me take you back to the early 2000s, when mobile phones were just starting to become a thing where I'm from. I had just finished high school and was gifted a bulky second-hand Nokia. Nothing fancy, but it was mine. I promised myself that someday I'd buy a shiny new phone with my own money. Fast forward to college. I had a 2-hour commute every day, and my old Nokia was barely hanging on. But my hard work in school paid off, literally. I had won a string of academic awards, and one of them, from a nationalized bank, came with a cash prize. Just enough to buy a brand new Sony Ericsson K300i and a premium SIM card to go with it. It felt like a dream. My first real purchase. Freedom. Status. Independence. But the dream started unraveling by day 3. I began receiving phone calls, relentless, daily, asking for someone named Bitzer. The tone was always urgent. Banks. Finance companies. Collections. Always demanding, always aggressive. Turns out, my premium SIM had a not-so-premium history. The previous owner had vanished, and the debt collectors were left with this number. My number now. At first, I did what anyone would do, told them it was a wrong number and hung up. But the calls didn't stop. So I began blocking them. Problem was, back then, blocking numbers was device-specific. Every time I upgraded, I had to start all over again. Still, I held on. I loved that number. It felt like part of me. I kept blocking, kept enduring. Life moved on. I graduated in 2009, landed my first job, and things were finally looking stable, until 2010, when I got assigned to a new project. That's when I met Bits. Bits was a name spoken in hushed tones around the office. The kind of manager people warned you about. A workplace tyrant. He was a one-man chaos engine. From the moment you logged in, the email storm hit: urgent, review now, need this in 30 minutes. He'd shift deadlines without notice, force weekend work, and expect overnight turnarounds. It wasn't just demanding, it was dehumanizing. He micromanaged every detail, took credit for all successes, and blamed everyone else for every single failure. Meetings were strategically timed to ruin your day, lunch breaks, Friday nights, even early Sundays. You were never really off the clock under Bits. And then there were the tantrums. Public humiliation was his favorite sport. He'd lash out in meetings, shout across cubicles, and criticize people for the tiniest things. He was hell incarnate with a corporate ID badge. But here's where things start to twist. In 2012, our company merged with a larger parent firm. We got upgraded systems, Outlook, organization charts, and most importantly, visibility. And one day, while scrolling through the org chart, I finally saw his full name. Bitzer. The same name I'd been hearing on debt collection calls for nearly a decade. I sat frozen. No way, I thought. It couldn't be him. That name might be common in our area. But the calls had always come from collectors linked to my region. The timelines lined up. The coincidences stacked too high. So I investigated. I contacted an old mentor, someone who'd been coaching high schoolers in my hometown for over 20 years. When I asked about a guy named Bitzer, his reaction told me everything I needed to know. Same school, same area, same guy. The ghost who once dumped his debt onto my phone line was now my tormentor at work. It was like realizing the monster under your bed and the demon in your boss's office were the same damn thing. And that's when I knew I wasn't just angry. I was ready. I dug up my old notes, the massive list of blocked numbers from debt collectors over the years. I unblocked them. Every single one. Within a week, the calls started flowing again. 5 or 6 a day. But this time, I didn't dismiss them. I embraced them. Whenever a collector asked for Bitzer, I didn't say wrong number. Instead, I calmly said, this number is no longer his. But I can help you update your records. And then, like a perfectly placed dagger, I gave them his current office number. And just in case they wanted extra assurance, I sweetened the deal. I gave them his direct manager's number, too. I figured if he tried to pull the not me trick, they could escalate it directly upstairs. What I didn't expect was just how deep this rabbit hole went. Turns out, Bitzer wasn't just a deadbeat. He was a serial financial predator. Over the years, he had taken out loans and credit cards in multiple names, his wife, his parents, even a couple of distant uncles. Some of the institutions he duped had no idea how to reach him because he'd used the same fake number, my number, for all of them. By now, his unpaid debts had ballooned to over $200,000 in USD equivalent. That's a life-ruining amount of money where we're from. He had over 20 active cases pending against him. But no one could find him. No address. No working number. Just a digital ghost, until I handed them the key. What happened next spread through the office like wildfire. Collectors started calling the office. Not just the main line, his personal extension. Then his managers. Then HR. Multiple people reported seeing him yelling into phones in the break room, slamming his desk shut, storming in and out of meetings looking like a man being hunted. Rumors flew, his bank accounts were frozen. Legal notices were being served at the office. HR had to step in. His past caught up to him like a tidal wave, and I was the one who pulled the floodgate open. 2 months later, he was gone. No farewell. No announcement. Just gone. Some say he was let go quietly. Others claim he resigned under pressure before legal trouble escalated. I don't really care which version is true. What mattered was, the monster who had tormented dozens of employees was finally drowned by his own sins. And I just sat back and enjoyed the silence. There's a poetic kind of justice in letting someone's past destroy their present, especially when that person built their power on ruining others. For years, he walked around thinking he was untouchable, throwing weight, abusing power. But karma doesn't knock. It calls. And I made sure it had the right number this time. Some debts are financial. Others are moral. Bits are owed both. In the end, it wasn't some grand lawsuit or whistleblower complaint that brought him down, it was a phone number. A connection he never thought would trace back to him. But it did. And it wrecked him. What do you think? Was this revenge justified or too far? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. If you've ever wanted karma to hit harder and faster, make sure you're subscribed. Like this video, and share it with someone who's dreaming of poetic justice. Until next time, stay sharp and stay petty. They jacked up the price on a dying woman's promise, hoping no one would notice. But they didn't expect us to turn the open house into an absolute disaster. Rotting eggs, biker BBQs, fake traffic jams, we weaponized everything to protect our friends, and it worked. If you've ever watched greedy landlords get away with screwing over decent people, this story will make your day. Hit that like button, subscribe for more real stories of sweet revenge, and drop a comment if you've ever dreamed of crashing an open house like this. Let's dive in. This story happened over 15 years ago, and to this day, it remains one of the most satisfying victories I've ever been a part of. My best friend and her husband had 5 kids and were living in a brutally expensive city. They were renting an old, 4-bedroom house for $400 a week. Now, you might think that's reasonable, but back in 2004, it was already steep, especially for a rundown place with moldy walls, ancient pipes, and a kitchen that probably hadn't seen a proper cleaning since the 80s. Still, they made it work. Not because of the house, but because of the landlord, a sweet, elderly woman who genuinely cared about people. She was wealthy beyond imagination and had a history of helping struggling families. She froze their rent for 5 years and even promised that once they saved enough for a bank loan, the house would be theirs. They trusted her. Everyone did. And after years of scraping and saving, they were finally ready. They called her up to say, "We're ready to buy." 2 days later, she passed away. Nothing had been put in writing. Enter the heirs. Her 4 children. Each one richer than the last. Property tycoons who saw real estate as numbers on a spreadsheet, not homes for real people. At first, they were reassuring. "Don't worry," they said. "We'll honor our mother's agreement. But you'll have to wait for probate to clear." So my friends waited. And in that time, they got hopeful again. They started prepping the house, stripping wallpaper, repainting, planning out renovations. They were going to make this their forever home. But the moment probate cleared, everything changed. Without warning, the heirs hiked the price up by $80,000. They didn't even tell my friends, just sent over a note saying the new price, and that if they couldn't pay, the house would be listed publicly. The open house was in 7 days. 7 days. My friends were crushed. The loan they were pre-approved for wasn't enough anymore. They might be able to scrape together more, but not in a week. Worse yet, rent prices in the city had exploded in the last 5 years while theirs had been frozen. If they were evicted, they wouldn't just lose the house, they'd be priced out of their own neighborhood. Possibly even the entire city. They weren't just losing a house. They were losing their future. I was furious. Not just because my friends were being robbed of their dream, but because these heirs, already sitting on mountains of wealth, were screwing over a struggling family for what amounted to $20,000 each. Pocket change to them. Survival for my friends. That's when the gears started turning. I knew we couldn't outbid rich buyers. But maybe we didn't have to. If they wanted to play dirty, we'd play smarter. I started researching what makes a property undesirable, what drives buyers away during open houses. And then, we started the real fun. Step 1, make the space feel small. We rearranged all the furniture so that none of it touched the walls. Then we added extra furniture, bulky, awkward pieces. We borrowed weird knickknacks and hung motorcycle memorabilia all over the walls. Think biker garage meets grandma's attic. The place felt claustrophobic and chaotic. Step 2, assault the nose. We boiled an entire head of cabbage on the stove just before the open house. Then we sprayed ammonia around the front and back doors. If you don't know that smell, imagine 20 neighborhood cats all marking their territory at once. But the pièce de résistance. We poured 2 dozen rotten eggs down the drain. The house reeked like a swamp of sewage and despair. Step 3, destroy the curb appeal. We got permission from the neighbor across the road to dump a moldy, ripped-up couch on their front lawn. It looked like something that had been pulled from a haunted basement. Perfect. Step 4. Manufacture a bad neighborhood. We called everyone we knew with a loud, beat-up car or motorbike and asked them to do laps during the open house. For about an hour, it looked like the street was hosting a demolition derby. Step 5. The rugby club. We invited our friends from the local rugby club. Big guys. Loud. Rough-looking. We offered free barbecue and cheap beer if they'd hang out next door during the open. They showed up in biker jackets, roaring in on motorcycles, laughing like pirates. We created the illusion of a weekly neighborhood circus. On the day of the open, the street looked like a war zone. There was traffic backed up down the block. The house stank. The walls were cluttered. Next door, a biker barbecue with half-drunk men shouting, laughing, and flipping sausages. People came to see the house, and immediately left. One woman never even got out of her car. She sat watching the party across the street, took one look at the couch on the neighbor's lawn, and drove away. Only one guy stayed long enough to get a tour. He tried to chat with one of the party guests as he left and asked how often this kind of thing happened. The party guy smiled and said, "Oh, at least every couple weeks. Sometimes it's worse. You should have seen last night. 3 doors up had a full band playing till 2 a.m. Then, for good measure, he casually mentioned the blocked drains and tree roots that make the whole place smell like a swamp. Needless to say, no offers came in. With no other bidders, my friends were able to offer close to the original price, still more than they'd hoped to pay, but far less than the greedy heirs had wanted. They signed the papers and paid the deposit that same day. And here's the best part. Just after the deal closed, the brave guy who stuck around during the open house came back and made an offer. It was $30,000 higher than my friend's offer. But under strict anti-gazumping laws, the sellers couldn't accept it. They were legally bound to the signed contract. So the greedy heirs ended up getting less than what they could have had, all because they tried to cheat the people their own mother wanted to help. I would pay money to have seen the look on their faces when they realized they'd been outplayed. This wasn't just revenge. This was justice. For the kids who finally got to stay in the home they grew up in. For the parents who refused to give up. And for a dying woman's promise that we kept alive, even if her own children tried to erase it. Sometimes, you can't beat wealth with wealth. But you can beat greed with community, strategy, and a little bit of stinky egg water. In the end, the best revenge isn't loud, it's watching someone trip on the very trap they set for someone else. What did you think? Was this the perfect revenge or did they go too far? Drop your thoughts in the comments. Don't forget to like this video if you've ever rooted for the underdog, and subscribe for more real-life stories where the good guys don't just survive, they win. See you in the next one. She left her AOL password on a sticky note, and that one careless slip destroyed 2 marriages. Let me tell you how I found out my wife was cheating, exposed her lover to his entire family, and watched his life implode, one glorious step at a time. Before we dive in, make sure to subscribe if you've ever believed karma should show up with a sledgehammer. Like this video if you've been betrayed, and comment below with the wildest revenge story you've ever heard. Because this one, it's personal. Back in the early 2000s, life was chaotic in the way young families often are. We had 2 kids, just 4 and 6 years old enough to talk, young enough to still see magic in the everyday. We weren't perfect, but I thought we were solid. Until the lies started piling up. It started with my kids. Innocent little voices telling me how they spent another day with my wife's parents. Sweet stories, nothing too strange, except her parents lived an hour and a half away. And she was dropping them off 2 or 3 times a week, on days she wasn't even working. That's when the suspicions started to seep in. I asked her about it. Her answers were vague, dismissive, just helping out mom and dad. But her voice cracked around the edges, and I knew she was lying. So I got smart. I started tracking her car's mileage every week. Nothing dramatic. Just a quick glance and a mental note. That first week, over 400 extra miles. Every part of me clenched. I knew, but I needed proof. Then came the mistake. Her mistake. One morning, I sat at our computer and there it was, a yellow sticky note stuck to the monitor with her AOL email password scribbled in her handwriting. She left it like it was nothing. Like there wasn't a whole other life hiding behind it. I logged in. Her inbox didn't just confirm my suspicions, it slapped me across the face. Dozens of emails between her and her old college friend. Laughing, gloating, describing the lunch meetups with an old high school boyfriend. I'll never forget one line, her mocking the guy's wife for gaining weight after having kids. No names were mentioned, but I didn't need them yet. I printed every exchange, every timestamp. I wasn't going to blow up. I wasn't going to scream. I was going to wait and watch. Because now it wasn't just about betrayal. It was about making sure no one else ever had to live with the wreckage of someone else's selfish choices, like I had growing up. Both of my parents had cheated on each other. The aftermath tore our home into pieces. It left me and my siblings with emotional shrapnel we never fully healed from. I vowed right then, this wasn't going to be history repeating itself. So I made a call. A friend of mine on the force connected me to a guy named Ron, an ex-cop turned private investigator. Ron didn't mess around. I paid his retainer, handed him the emails, gave him her rough schedule, and let him work. Within weeks, Ron handed me a binder full of cold, devastating facts. Photos, dates, motel receipts, surveillance logs, everything. My wife had been taking the kids to her parents' place, meeting up with this man for lunch, and spending hours at a rundown motel before picking the kids up and coming home to smile in my face. Ron even followed her into the parking lot of one of those motels, camera ready, when she kissed the guy like they were some sort of tragic romance novel. I handed everything to my divorce attorney. And then I asked Ron to dig into him, the other man. If he was going to insert himself into my family, I was going to insert myself into his life, too. And boy, did Ron deliver. His name was Bob. Married. 3 kids. Vice president of sales at his father-in-law's company. Now that was interesting. Bob was cheating on his wife with mine, while working at a company owned by her father, and living in a house also owned by her parents. He was neck deep in their world, and completely oblivious to how fragile his little kingdom really was. That's when I started planning the strike. I had divorce papers drawn up and ready to go. I scheduled them to be served to my wife at her workplace, publicly, painfully, and with finality. But I wasn't done. I had Ron deliver the full report, photos and all, to Bob's wife. She didn't deserve to live in the dark. What she did next, that was up to her. But what followed was delicious. Public records showed that Bob's wife wasted no time. She drained their joint accounts, took the kids, and filed for divorce. And when her father, Bob's boss, found out, fired. Immediately. And since they were living in one of her parents' houses, Bob was also evicted. 1 week, he had a wife, kids, a cushy job, and a roof over his head. The next, he had nothing. But wait, it gets worse. Their divorce spiraled into a courtroom war zone. One day, Bob showed up to the house to talk things out. That turned into a shouting match. Then her brother stepped in and broke Bob's nose. Police reports were filed. Restraining orders issued. Multiple run-ins with the law followed. Eventually, criminal charges. Even jail time. Bob's spiral was complete. He disappeared after that. Last I heard, he left the state. Wiped himself off social media. Vanished into whatever hole he could still crawl into. As for his ex-wife, she landed on her feet. Went to work for her dad's company and eventually took over when he retired. Her kids are doing well. She's doing well. She took devastation and built something solid from the ashes. And me. I didn't torch everything. I didn't scream or fight. I didn't threaten or throw dishes. I handed over evidence. I told the truth. And I let the consequences do their work. My ex-wife and I have remained civil for the kids' sake. We talked only when necessary. Now that they're grown, we don't speak anymore, and I'm okay with that. I don't hate her. But I don't feel anything, either. She's just someone I used to know, someone who made her choice. But Bob, he made his too. And I made sure it was the last selfish choice he'd ever make without consequences. Some revenge is about the fire, the explosion, the dramatic takedown. But sometimes, the best revenge is the controlled burn. The slow, steady collapse of a house built on lies. What do you think? Was this too far or perfectly justified? Let me know in the comments. And if you've ever caught a cheater and dreamed of dropping the hammer, Hit that like button and subscribe for more real stories where karma doesn't miss. He told me I wasn't ready, that I needed too much hand-holding, that I didn't have leadership instincts. Funny thing is, I took his job 6 months later, and by the time he realized what had happened, it was too late to stop any of it. If you've ever been underestimated, overlooked, or sabotaged by someone in power, you're going to love this story. Hit that like button, subscribe for more real revenge stories, and comment below if you've ever worked for a boss who couldn't handle your potential. Because this one, it's about taking back control. Let me take you back a few years. At the time, I worked as a marketing specialist at a booming mid-sized tech company. You know the kind: ping pong tables, beer taps, people in hoodies saying synergy unironically. I was one of the quieter ones. Head down, on time, dependable. I wasn't the loudest person in the room, but my campaigns worked. I tracked my metrics. I kept things clean and tight. My nickname, unofficially, was the closer, because when a project started drifting off course, I was the one they called in to fix it. But no one saw that more than my manager, Jeff. Jeff was a showman. All charm, no spine. He wore startup hoodies like armor, laughed too loud in meetings, and had a tendency to turn every sentence into a buzzword soup. Let's pivot the narrative, leverage our core differentiator, and get some low-hanging wins on the board. Translation: I'm going to take your idea and present it like it was mine. It started small. A suggestion I made in a meeting somehow became Jeff's insight. A slide I built got presented without my name. Then it snowballed. Every time one of our projects succeeded, Jeff was the guy basking in the spotlight. When it failed, I was the one still learning. But I didn't complain. Yet. Because I had a plan. After 2 years under Jeff, a senior strategist position opened up in the analytics and brand division. Different department, new leadership, better pay, and more autonomy. A dream move. I prepped hard. Spent 2 weekends putting together a full portfolio, campaign metrics, project ownership breakdowns, visual mock-ups, case studies. I even preemptively did a teardown on one of the company's underperforming brand channels and built a roadmap to fix it. The hiring manager was impressed. The interview went great. All I needed was one final piece, a reference from my current manager. I wasn't worried. Jeff had always called me his rock. Said I was the most dependable player on the team. So when I asked him if he'd support the internal transfer, he grinned and said, "Of course. I'll tell them you're ready for the big leagues." What he told them instead: "You're not leadership material." I didn't find out immediately. When I got the rejection email, it felt off, like a polite door slam without any real feedback. We've decided to move forward with other candidates at this time. So I reached out to one of my friends in analytics who'd been looped into the decision process. I wasn't fishing for gossip, just confused. That's when she hesitated. "I thought Jeff wasn't on board," she said. "He said you're super solid, but not quite ready. Too reliant on his direction, you know?" My stomach dropped. Jeff, who'd told me to my face he had my back, lied. Not just to me, to the company, to people I respected. That night, I sat in the dark, scrolling through every file, every document I'd built, trying to understand what I'd done wrong. And the answer hit me like a slap. Nothing. Jeff wasn't protecting the company. He was protecting his power. If I moved to another department and thrived, people would start asking questions. Start wondering who really ran our projects. If I became visible, he became vulnerable. He didn't want to lose me. He wanted to own me. And that was the last straw. I didn't rage quit. I didn't report him. I didn't start rumors. I started documenting. Every campaign I led, who initiated it, who built it, who presented it. Every Jeff idea that originated in a Slack message from me. I took screenshots, compiled emails, tracked changes in slide decks. I saved everything in a secure offline folder I called insurance. Meanwhile, I started rebuilding my internal network. I volunteered for stretch projects with other teams. I stayed late helping other departments. I offered brand support to a product team that was drowning and, in the process, built strong relationships with 2 senior VPs. I made sure they knew what I brought to the table, not through bragging, but through action. Quiet, strategic, precise. Then fate handed me a golden opportunity. A major industry competitor, bigger company, better benefits, launched a surprise recruiting campaign aimed at poaching talent from our firm. They were hunting for experienced strategists and campaign managers. And guess who reached out to me on LinkedIn? A senior recruiter for their North America marketing division. We talked. We clicked. After a few rounds of interviews, they said, "We're deciding between you and another candidate. A guy named Jeff. Do you know him?" I almost laughed. Of course I did. But I didn't trash him. I didn't stoop to his level. I just said, if you're comparing campaign portfolios, I'd recommend looking closely at who actually built the content. Sometimes the loudest voice in the room isn't the one doing the work. And then I sent them my documentation. Not as an attack, just as proof. Campaign credits, metrics, lead ownership, even screenshots of Slack and email threads showing Jeff slapping his name onto work he didn't touch. 2 weeks later, I got the job. And Jeff, they ghosted him. When I handed in my notice, he played it cool at first. "Wow," he said. "They must have really needed a mid-level fix-it type." I smiled. They were actually hiring for the senior strategist role you interviewed for. The color drained from his face. He mumbled something about not being interested in it anymore and walked away. But I could feel it, that quiet panic boiling under the surface. And that wasn't even the end. After I started the new job, I learned from a shared industry contact that our former VP of marketing had reached out to Jeff's would-be new employer for a reference check. Apparently, someone flagged inconsistencies in his resume, claimed campaigns he hadn't led, metrics that didn't match internal dashboards. Turns out, I wasn't the only one documenting. 2 months after I left, I got a LinkedIn message from another former teammate. "Did you hear about Jeff? Fired." Not immediately. But once his leadership realized the gaps, and once the people he'd blamed in the past started speaking up, the pattern emerged. The guy who said I wasn't leadership material burned every bridge he thought would carry him across the river. Today, I lead a growing strategy team of 14 brilliant people. We've tripled our quarterly performance in under a year. We don't do politics. We don't do ego. We build. We share. We rise together. Jeff. He's off the radar. Last I heard, he's consulting freelance. But I doubt that'll last long. In an industry like ours, reputations matter. And he spent years building a house of mirrors. Eventually, someone sees through the glass. Revenge isn't always a loud explosion. Sometimes, it's the quiet closing of a door. Sometimes, it's watching the person who held you down try to climb, only to find there's no one left to step on. What do you think? Was this justice or just strategy? Let me know in the comments. Like this video if you've ever wanted to take back your power. And make sure to subscribe for more stories where karma doesn't wait in line, it kicks the door in and makes itself at home. Until next time.